say, but how can we lie?
What have you heard about willing to give up, and what was the reason?
Well, I don't know. That's kind of why I'm asking you. I've just heard that Ibn Mansur, that there was a standardization under Uthman. Ibn Mansur didn't want to stop using his version of the Quran, so he preferred his to the Uthmanic version. Can you enlighten me any further?
I think first of all, rather than learning from Tom, Dick and Harry, so to speak, because you are someone who's academic minded, go back to our sources and you will see the whole narration talks about the reasons why he's not willing to give up. Okay? So a few points I can mention to you for you to look into. He wasn't willing to give up his own personal copy that he has himself transcribed with his copious notes that he may have added to it. Because if you have something which is very treacherous to you and very personal to you, you want to give it up. Why do I have to give it up? He was, in a way, you can see like he was saying like how young he was when he has memorized directly from the Prophet the 70 surahs of the Quran. Okay? So the issue is not it's not that he didn't say it should be standardized or it's totally different from this. It's the issue is his own personal copy being handed over and to be destroyed. Okay? And who was involved in the actual transcribing of the copies.
I did hear, and this could be utterly wrong, I did hear that it wasn't just his own personal copy, but that he told those in his community to keep using his version, not the Uthmanic. Again, that could be utterly false.
And then what happened later on? Did he change his mind?
I don't know, did he?
Yes. In fact, we have recitations, authentic mutawatir transmissions, we call them the mass transmission, from him through his students. So we recite today authentically in various parts of the world his recitation.
Any other questions?
Well, for me, my issue was, I guess my biggest issue is, in terms of reliability, is the same people who recited the Quran, as you would believe, to be accurately, and it's, obviously it's the same as when it was originally given as far as you're concerned. They're the same ones that recited, the narrations, the Hadith. The narrations in the Hadith. They're the same people that recited the narrations in the Hadith. But we know, even you would confirm, that some of those narrations are not considered to be reliable. But if it's the same people transmitting one thing and they're fallible, it's possible for them to be fallible in that sense. Why would it not be possible for them to be fallible in terms of reciting the Quran as well?
It is not necessarily the case where the same people transmitted the Hadith and the Quran. Some people specialized in the Quran and transmission of the Quran. Other people specialized in transmission of the Hadith. Other people specialized in transmission of the biography of the Prophet or the battles and the expeditions that he took over, the maghazi. So there are specific people with specific interest. So you cannot just conflate everything, say everyone's doing everything the same. Okay? The people who transmitted the Quran, we know their biography and we know how reliable they are. Because if you check their biography, what we call the isnad, and each people within the isnad, what were the characteristics of their what were their character like in terms of, did they actually have a very good memory, profoundly good memory? Did they hear from their teacher, and did the teacher then give them permission to continue transmitting this? So all of these are documented.
Can I just ask about that? The sources that tell us what the transmitters were like, their character, when were those sources written down? Do you know? As in, how large is the gap between the transmitters in question and the sources telling us about the transmitters?
I think there's an issue about people thinking like everything has to be written from day one. There has always been parallel transmission of memorization to memorization, oral form of transmission, and also transmission which is written. Okay? So often you might find some of the documents that we have got now is actually from 200, 300 years later, about some of the books of Hadith and so on, or from even other literatures. It doesn't mean that they just appeared in a vacuum and there was no pre-existent material already. Okay? It's when the activity took place in such a way that, okay, now people are collecting. If you look at now collectors of reports, when did they appear? Initially there were people who are writing, they had their own copies and they're transmitting this and so on. Later on, as people are gathering together, somehow they assimilated a lot of these materials, and these materials gradually they went, outside our possessions, okay? Because they got assimilated in later works, and later works became very famous. But one thing to bear in mind, when we have all this transmission going, it never isolated in a vacuum, or it was an isolated case. You had the community which was living and thriving and teaching constantly. Hundreds and thousands of Muslims, they're coming together. To give you an example, one of the readings of the Quran, because we're talking about the Quran primarily here, Imam al-Nafi', he was in Medina teaching and leading the prayers in the Masjid al-Nawawi for more than 40 years. So his transmission, the qira'ah, or the recital of Imam al-Nafi' has been transmitted to us. Now, someone who's been teaching for 40 years, just imagine how many hundreds of students that he will have over these 40 years, and how many students will have received permission to continue to teach further. Okay? So it is not something like, oh, just one person heard and that's it. Continuous living tradition and transmission of the Quran. Hadith likewise. They didn't just say we heard one hadith, so no. They would have hadith teaching sessions. Will go to a teacher. The teacher will teach them from his own books. They will learn, they will write down, and they will come back to their teacher. So even just one hadith. You know the stories about how hadiths were collected. It will take maybe a year or more to travel around to come to that place because someone's got a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They will just go there and authenticate and verify that. Even just one hadith. So when we're talking about how they were different in terms of the same people, why were there weak narrations or fabricated narration from the same people? Because we have people who are specializing in the Quran. They actually carried on specializing in the Quran. They did not really consider themselves to preoccupy themselves in transmitting the hadith, even though there are some who had excelled in both. But the Quran that has been transmitted for the 10 authentic, multiple narrated, multiple chains of transmissions, there is no dispute among the Muslim community about their integrity, about their character, about whether they had a good memory or not. And they transmit it to their students, and we know about their students and continue till to this day. So you have people who have not memorized the whole of the Quran, they have memorized all of the transmission chain, and they will tell you, I learned from my sheikh. Say my teacher Abdullah, just give you a name. Who is this Abdullah? Abdullah lived for 90 years, and he has taught numerous number of students this Quran, who also transmitted with the permission or the ijazah to various other people. Okay, so this sheikh that this person Abdullah is transmitting from, so my teacher is Abdullah, Sheikh Abdullah. Now Sheikh Abdullah for 90 years he has been taught, and his teaching has been transmitted maybe countless number of other students. But I am only tracing the transmission of the Quran to my sheikh only. Other students, they can trace to him. But when you compare all of these tracings, what do you have? You have this convergence of all these people going back eventually through him and through various other teachers, all the way going back to those transmitters, initial transmitters, and the teachers of the transmitters, back to the Prophet ﷺ. And what do we find? I'll give you an example of the readings of Imam al-Nafi'. His two famous students, many students were transmitting it. Famous, Qalun, and who else? Anyone else? Pardon? Who are the students of Imam al-Nafi'? Warsh. Okay? Qalun and Warsh. So Warsh al-Nafi', Qalun al-Nafi'. If you look at the Qalun, riwayat of Qalun, and if you riwayat of Warsh, check individually. All the people who have learned the riwayat of Warsh, if you go to Morocco now, go somewhere else. See anyone who has been reading the riwayat of Warsh. Are there any difference between them?
I'll take your word for it.
Why are there no differences? Even to the letter, when we're talking about the sounds, the intonation.
But isn't there at least one difference in the Warsh text? Because I've heard that Yusuf Ali's version of the Quran, translation, he notes in a footnote in one of his versus the Warsh text reads this and it's different. So is there an
Different from what?
There was a
Different from
Warsh
Hafs?
text, the other one you mentioned, yeah,
Yeah,
different
no, not from. We're talking about the Hafs, the other Qira'ah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about Warsh versus Hafs. We're talking about Warsh versus Warsh. So throughout the world, the Warsh Qira'ah. Throughout the world, the Hafs Qira'ah. Hafs, which has become very famous, you know, we read everywhere it's printed Hafs, but you have no other prints as well. Why are they all the same? Why have they remained the same?
I guess the argument is going to be because they're all it's the same, obviously the same.
Because if you now look how they have been transmitted meticulously, you know, from this teacher to teacher and teacher, this transmission has been in a way that the teacher will say, fine, I give you permission or ijazah to teach this recitation of Imam Warsh only after what? That I know that you can recite exactly the way I have learned. Exactly the way I've learned. Unless I am convinced of that, then I don't give you permission. You're just another student who have learned from me, but you have not been authorized to transmit the Quran, linking the chain all the way back to the Prophet. So we are ensuring the teacher is satisfied that he or she has taught the students who has repeated back to him or her exactly the way he has learned or she has learned from his teacher. Why do I say he or she? An amazing number of Muslim women have also learned the Quran and transmitted the Quran. We don't hear about them because we think like from sheikh to sheikh. It's not the case. So when we have this teacher, you know, in my example, teacher Abdullah, how did he get his permission to teach?
He would have been certified.
He does it exactly like that. And it goes all the way back to the first Imam.
Next 1 point. Again.
That is why we